Tell the story to him?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'd like to tell you about the last time I was here at the Civil Rights Museum. I was directing the regional premiere of Tony Hall's play, The Mountaintop. Tony Hall is a Memphian, and we were doing the regional premiere of the play here. And it's a fictional play about Dr. King's last night on Earth before he was assassinated. So we were allowed to visit the room where he was staying, which is up there. You see the balcony where he was standing when he was shot. And the hotel was undergoing renovations. The museum was undergoing renovations. So we couldn't see it the way a tourist would normally see it. So the staff took us inside the room. They all had all their white gloves on so that if we needed to see anything, they could pick it up for us. They allowed us to take pictures of everything in the room because the play is set in his room. So we wanted to replicate the room as accurately as possible. Now, one of the things we learned is that after he was assassinated, the room was not locked down per se, so a lot of things went missing over the years, things that people who knew him wanted to have or people who worked here wanted to have. So the room as we see it is a close replica of what was in the room that night. It's not exactly the same things that were in that room. But being in the room for me was a great honor. I felt some sense of awe of being in a place that someone so important to all of us had actually stayed, had spent time in the balcony outside right where he'd been assassinated. So it was very sobering, reminding me of all the sacrifices people had made so people like you and I could have opportunities that were not afforded us in the past. So it was a very exciting time for me as an artist, but it was also a very sobering and somber time to be in the space.
So what was your most profound moment here in Memphis?
Profound. That's a tough one. What is my most profound moment? I can't, let me say this. I was a child when Dr. King was assassinated, so I wasn't quite sure about all what was going on, but as I got older, I began to understand what racism was and that we were not given the same rights as white folks. So as I got older and understood that, I had many moments that were, I'd say, unforgettable moments for me as a young man. So my most unforgettable moment was I was one of a handful of African American students at a small Catholic school which had previously been all white, and I played on the basketball team for camaraderie and fun. I wasn't very good at it, and I will never forget the day that my coach was so angry because I couldn't do something well, and he screamed in front of all the kids, you are the most uncoordinated nigger I have ever met in my life." Now, to be called a nigger, I had been called that, but not by someone who was in a position of authority, not by someone who was hired by my school where I went, where I was supposed to feel safe or feel that I was being taken care of and learning. And I think that was a really watershed moment for me as a child to recognize that no matter who I was or what I did, that in some people's eyes, in some white people's eyes, I was always going to be a nigger. And that was new to me. That was a new idea to me. I was probably 10 or 11, and that was the moment I really understood what was going on in the world I lived in. So that was a particularly memorable moment for me.
Great. So you mentioned that you live in Milwaukee.
I live in Milwaukee.
How does that differ from living to?
I find the cities very similar in a lot of ways. I feel that the black community in both cities has been suffering a long time. I feel like both cities are very segregated. I feel like there's a lot of poverty and issues of literacy in the black community. But one thing changed in Memphis some years ago when we got our first black mayor. We became hopeful, and there was a sense of empowerment, I feel, that continues to this day. It's a black city with black leaders. Milwaukee is still just, about 45% black. And when I go to Milwaukee, I always feel, and this is just my perception, I always feel the black community is feeling really pushed down and really oppressed because we don't have the same kind of political power and the same type of resources that we have here in Memphis to lift our community up. And I feel like that is a big difference between the two. And as an outsider to Milwaukee, that's my sense of it. People who are from there may not feel that way, but that's how I feel about it. But otherwise, we're very much the same. It feels very much like a place I grew up in. It feels like Memphis in every possible way.
So I have a question, but it might be a little bit off topic.
Okay.
So we as people are the human race. So why do you think that race is? Why do you think that race is the way it is? You know, the question.
Well, here's my thought about all of that.
Because in a way, race is a social construct.
It is a
race
social
isn't
construct.
real.
It is, but people, by nature, I believe, want to be powerful and oppress others so that they can feel safe. I think that's the nature of humankind, and I believe that as people are able to find differences in others so that they can separate themselves from others, it's a natural way to gain power or to separate themselves out. So I feel like that's just the way human beings are. I'd like to think that this particular time in history that we are beyond that we can recognize that we're really all the same. External differences like race define us in some ways, but do not determine
Who we are.
on the inside. And I feel like there's been a major shift in the world, in this world, in Memphis, Tennessee, since I was a kid. This was a city I wanted to run away from growing up. And now I feel like I could live here because your generation, the young people, have come to a new level of understanding. I think there's a different way that you've been raised, that your white peers have been raised, that your Asian and Latino peers have been raised, so that people learn to get along as people and see race as something to celebrate, differences as something to celebrate, but not to use as a tool to oppress. So you're the future. You guys are my hope for the future.
Yes.